Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 801, June the 3rd, 2019, Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you all had a good weekend. Alrighty. So I went back because we were talking the other day about the Mueller team and this phrase, Mueller put this team together. We keep hearing this phrase, Mueller selected these people, Mueller selected those people. And I mentioned in the video that it wasn't exactly Uncle Bob the Executioner who put that team together. Okay, he was himself selected by a small group of people, as was the entire team. The team, Mueller did not pick the team, and we hear that Weissman picked the team, but really there's a little more to it than that. And I remember this, and so I had to go back and look at my timeline and my notes to figure out, refresh my memory on exactly how that team got set up. So now I've done that, so I just want to refresh all of our memories on this. Okay, so Mueller did not select that team. We know that it was Andy McCabe, and we know from the text of Andy McCabe that the Mueller team was actually assembled by James Baker, the general counsel to the FBI director, as well as Weissman and McCabe. So it was Baker, Weissman, and McCabe who not only chose Mueller as the guy that they wanted and referred him to Rodenstein, but they also had pretty much handpicked his team before he even got there. Mueller himself had been handpicked. So it was really McCabe, Baker, and Weissman who put together Mueller and his team, which of course included Weissman heading up that team. And then we know that right after Rodenstein went ahead and appointed Mueller as the special counsel and allowed this group of players who had been put together by McCabe, Baker, and Weissman, allowed that to go forward as Mueller's team. And then if you remember what happened, Rodenstein and McCabe were having a bit of a dispute and have never, it seems, ever really got along very well. So right after Rodenstein authorized Uncle Bob the Executioner as special counsel and was okay with the team that was put together by McCabe and Weissman and Baker, at that point, Rodenstein pulled McCabe away and said, okay, McCabe could no longer have anything to do with this investigation. So that is how that all came together as far as the Mueller team. So now we have refreshed our memory on that, and we're all correct that the Mueller didn't pick his team. And then we were talking, well, Weissman put the team together. It was actually McCabe and Weissman and Baker, and we know that from McCabe's, I think they're texts, but they may be emails. But anyway, that's how that all came together. Now, Uncle Bob the Executioner is terrified. Terrified. I don't know how many of you watched that 9-minute and some odd second press conference the other day, but I've watched it 3 times now. And first I was just listening to what Uncle Bob was saying. Then I watched it a second time, was just kind of thinking a little harder about it. But the third time I was watching Uncle Bob the Drive-By Executioner, just watching him. I didn't turn the volume down, but I probably could have because I didn't pay attention to what he was saying. I was just watching the third time his facial expressions, his eye movements. I was watching his general body language. And I conclude from that Uncle Bob the Executioner was terrified. He looked kind of pathetic. He looked kind of beaten down. He looked weak and nervous while he was giving that statement. And he has a lot of reasons to be feeling all these things. But that's what he was telegraphing in his body language. So I am calling once again for Lindsey Graham to call in Uncle Bob, the Drive-By Executioner Mueller, subpoena him if necessary, and debrief him and expose his and his posse's role in the plot. Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner, there's a lot of questions that he needs to answer, a lot that he needs to explain. And I've asked a couple, but again, just to reiterate what me and other people have said, the real biggies, when the investigation into Trump really began and why. And the truth this time, it didn't begin on July 31st, 2016. Uncle Bob the Executioner has to know this. Yet he says there in his report that that's what he's echoing. He did nothing more than echo the FBI's talking points without investigating any of it. Clearly, anyone who looks at this even for just a little while can figure out that that simply cannot be true. Papagalopoulos, if it was his interaction with Downer that led to that, then you certainly would look at him and go, okay, well, this Papagalopoulos guy, well, we got to look at him. Well, when you start looking at him, you realize that he was being contacted by FBI and various intelligence sources and assets way back in February, late February and March of 2016. And if you were to look even deeper into that and you had access to the information Uncle Bob has, you would realize that he was probably under a FISA before that. So this statement can simply not be true. Uncle Bob needs to explain that thoroughly and truthfully. He needs to explain what the probable cause was that justified the investigation. Crossfire Hurricane we're talking. He needs to explain why did the report fail to even mention the dossier by name. Yet he uses the information from it, but never says what the source is. It was the dossier. That's no accident. It's no accident. He purposely left out the term dossier while using all the information from it in his report. His bogus report. His dossier. Why did the report not explain the origin of the dossier, the sources, the entities that paid for it, and the multiple streams that were used to move the dossier into the various government agencies? Uncle Bob needs to come forward and tell us who was it that cleared the team for conflicts of interest. The special counsel law requires, before the special counsel actually goes into effect, requires that someone take a peeky peek to see if there are any conflicts of interest. And apparently the special counsel guidelines were followed, which means there is some person or persons who were charged with clearing the team for conflicts of interest. Who were those people? Why were Flynn, Page, Papagalopoulos, and the Trump campaign staff not briefed that they were being targeted by the Russians? I have yet to hear a good explanation for that. Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner, needs to come up with an answer, because no one else has come up with one yet that satisfies even the person with the most limited amount of imagination. And that is what A.G. Barr, one of the many things that he's obviously not impressed with at this point. Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner Mueller, needs to be asked why he destroyed the Strzok and Page's phones after they left the employment of the special counsel. No one's answered that question yet, and he would be the guy to ask. That literally would be obstruction of justice. When the Department of Justice or the FBI are doing an investigation, or even your local cops, they are not allowed to destroy any evidence. Any evidence. For or against. Yet it was done. Someone needs to ask Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner Mueller, if he coordinated with any of the Democratic members of Congress about the decision to make that public statement? And did he discuss, if so, did he discuss the topics or the desired objective in making a public statement 2 weeks after the release of his dossier report? Someone needs to ask Uncle Bob if Misfit was a Western intelligence asset or a Russian asset. And what, if anything, did Mueller's team do to verify Mifsid's status? He needs to be asked whether Alexander Downer was coordinating with any intelligence agency or private intel firm or the FBI or anyone associated with the government or anyone involved in this investigation. Was he in contact with anyone before he approached Papadopoulos? He needs to be asked if they even looked into that at all. And Uncle Bob, the executioner, needs to be asked if he had any conversation with Comey, McCabe, or Rodenstein after Comey was fired and prior to him taking up his position as the special counsel. Those are just a few more questions Uncle Bob absolutely needs to answer that cannot be left just floating in the air. Lindsey Graham, it looks like you might be the person that will have to do this, because it looks like Nadler has been pretty quiet now the last 2 days. Right after Uncle Bob came out and made the statement, he and a half a dozen other Democrats came up and said, oh, well, Uncle Bob's got to come and testify. But the last 2 days, Saturday and all day today, they've gone quiet. They're not talking about it anymore. Just like I said, they obviously got the message that this would not be good for the team to force Uncle Bob to testify. And just as I knew it would happen, so now I'm saying, Lindsey Graham, you're next man up. Well, we have that idiot from CNN who's, how they're still in business, I have absolutely no idea. Now, obviously, they're owned by a super wealthy conglomerate that can afford to lose tens of millions of dollars a year, and they're willing to do that to be the Hate Trump network. But they are losing a boatload of money. We know that they're laying off people, they're firing people, they're shutting down entire divisions. They just got rid of all their London-based staff. They got rid of all their staff that dealt with, I think it was healthcare. They got rid of all their experts there. They're asking people who write stories for them, independents, to be willing to wait 3 months to get paid. So there's obviously a lot of problems going on over there at CNN. There's not a single person there. Their highest ranking, best show cannot even pull, not even 1 million viewers. That's hard to believe, a major network. If it wasn't for airports and bus stations, I don't know who in the hell would be tuned into CNN. But we have this idiot CNN, Chris Cuomo, saying that Trump supporters are mostly middle-aged, angry, white males. Middle-aged, angry, white males. Well, clearly, Cuomo has never been to a Trump rally, because if he were to go to a Trump rally, he would see that it's at least half females. And you see people from their 20s all the way to their 70s at a Trump rally. And more you're seeing African Americans, Latinos. You're seeing people from all different cultures and races attending Trump rallies in large numbers. So this is a false statement. Again, fake news. Fake news. Trump nailed it. Nailed it from the very beginning. And they are living up to that label. Well, I'm sure many of you watched Maria Bartiromo on Sunday morning. Michael Mukasey was on there, and he laid out a couple of things. One I really focused in on. He says that there are a lot of nervous people in Washington. Yep, I've been saying that since shortly after A.G. Barr came in. I've been saying, yeah, this guy could make a lot of people very nervous. And then we saw how he put the kibosh on the Mueller investigation and brought that to a close. We saw how he short-circuited Uncle Bob by putting out a conclusion statement rather than let Uncle Bob's Chapter 2 of his report turn into the fodder for an impeachment campaign. He put the kibosh on that. So we can see that then he, of course, appointed a good special counsel or U.S. attorney outside D.C. He's doing all the things I would do if I really wanted to get to the bottom of this. And so since I have observed A.G. Barr and am now under the belief that he is a straight shooter, in the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been making the same statement that yes, there are many, very many nervous people in D.C. A lot of them are lawyering up. I believe I said the phrase I used was there's going to be a shortage of criminal defense attorneys in D.C. in the very near future. But Mulcahy also said that the first line of the Mueller report is a lie. The very first line of the Mueller report is a lie, according to Michael Mulcahy. He says that they opened, in the report it says that they opened the file in 2016. He's talking about the investigation. They opened the file in 2016 after Papagalopoulos' conversation with Downer. As Michael Mulcahy points out, that is not what started the investigation, because there was many, many things going on long before that. As I have pointed out, as many, many other people have pointed out, the fact that they continue to try to stick to this is just mind-boggling. The only thing I can think of on the FBI side is that they can say, well, this is when we started our investigation, which means that they're going to try to disassociate themselves from whatever the intelligence community was doing and any other agency or private contractor or foreign government. This is the only thing that the FBI can really do. They certainly are not going to try to pretend that there was nothing going on before July 31st, 2016. It's just not possible. But they're locked in. They can't really get out of it, because this is what they came out and said about a year and a half ago. They said, okay, it all started July 31st, 2016. But now that a year and a half has gone by, and it's clear, and it was clear to me even back then, that there was a lot of things going on long before that, they're kind of locked in. So they're going to have to try to find a way to use tricky wording to try to spin themselves out of it, but it's simply not going to work, because A.G. Barr is not going to let a bunch of wording cloud his understanding of what happened here. The way that the words they use to describe what happened is not all that important. What is important is the actual facts and evidence and the actions, the physical actions that took place. That's what he'll be looking at. The words will really mean very little when it actually gets down to the time, other than proving that they're lying under oath. That will be the only way that will come into play. So yes, well done, Michael Mulcahy, pointing that out. We had Rudy Giuliani telling Fox that he believes that 3 to 5 Obama officials are going to be indicted. Giuliani tells Fox that 3 to 5 will be indicted. Well, I have said, I think a couple of months ago when I first started kind of thinking about this, and I'm going to stick with my original number, which was 2 to 3 dozen people will face some sort of indictment. Some of them will be major indictments, jail time, serious felonies, multiple felonies. Some will be probably like misdemeanors or things like that. I think there will be 2 to 3 dozen people who face criminal prosecution as a result. Some of these people will cop plea deals. Most of them will actually cop plea deals. Some will try to fight it, go through the court procedure or what have you. But ultimately, I believe that 2 to 3 dozen people will actually end up facing legal consequences and will be charged with some sort of criminal activity, whether it be felonies, multiple felonies, all the way down to some misdemeanors, first degree, second degree misdemeanors. So I said the other day to really watch the media. This is the next thing to watch, and this is what I'm watching very carefully myself every day now, because I remember during Watergate how this all happened. You know, the press was never all that interested in the Watergate story. Most of them didn't believe it. It wasn't until after Woodward and Bernstein discovered and found out that the money that was paid to the burglars actually came from money from the campaign to reelect the president, Nixon. And once that story came out and they went down, they actually got the money, or it was in check, actually it was in the check, and they were able to trace the check and find out the route it took, and that's when they actually tied the money in the burglars' pockets to the Nixon campaign. And at that point, everything changed. The media didn't care about that story, thought it was a nothing burger. Everyone began following the story, investigating the story, and writing about the story. And that's when everything really turned. So that's why I say that's the next major thing to look for, is when the media turns. They'll be forced to turn here very, very soon, because they're going to reach the point where they simply know that they cannot cover up the truth any longer. They've been trying as long as possible, and largely, in this particular case, unlike Watergate, in this particular case, they're actually complicit. Now, whether or not they're criminally liable, I don't know. But they were certainly complicit in the plot, going along with the plot. Whether they were doing it knowingly or unknowingly, they were participants in the plot, whether they knew it or not. And I have a reason to believe that some of them, if not many of them, knew that they were part of the plot. So this is another reason why they've been trying forever not to actually cover the real crime that was committed. But there'll come a point where they simply cannot do it anymore. And I'm already seeing that happen. We just saw the New York Times a couple of weeks write a story on a Sunday. Then they wrote another story, now starting to actually look at and investigate it. Now, of course, they're trying to put a completely different spin on it and show that maybe the FBI was duped by some Russians. And they got, in other words, the FBI wasn't criminal. They simply got duped. They were ignorant. They were fools. Whatever. They would rather make them look stupid than make them than produce the evidence that they were criminals. That seems to be the fallback position. But that's going to fall away very soon. That's not going to carry very long. And literally today, or as you're watching this video, you're seeing on Monday. I'm recording this video on a Sunday evening. But if you looked at the Sunday headlines, more and more papers now are writing stories beginning to focus on what may have actually happened. So it's already began, and it's just a matter of time. There's probably one or two more details that are going to come out that are going to be so damning that will finally break the camel's back, and they'll be forced to go all in, and then at that point it'll be the complete media onslaught. Remember, these media organizations cannot be caught this far behind on the story. They're already looking bad because they missed it for so long and got it so wrong for so long. But keep in mind these individual reporters. Remember, Woodward and Bernstein's entire careers, they were hacks. They weren't really great reporters. They were hacks. But that made their careers. Since Watergate, the rest of their careers was made. They've made a lot of money, written books, been on TV. They're looked at as, the Woodward and Bernstein and Watergate are just etched in every mind of every reporter. It's the kind of story that makes your career. There are many journalists sitting there at the Washington Post, at the New York Times, and various other papers that are sitting there. They know what the truth of the story is, but they can't write about it because their senior editors will never let it go to print. They're forbidden from telling the truth about the story. And believe me, when it's finally okay to do so, it'll be the senior editors and the senior writers who get to actually do it. It's not going to be handed down to low-level journalists, and that's what's bumming these people out. Because there are many of these reporters that know, and they're dying to make their careers and make their names in the news biz, but they know that they really can't unless they choose to break away from their job and become an independent journalist and then try to expose it. But right now, there's just too many good reporters that are already so far ahead of them, like Sarah Carter and John Solomon and Lee Smith and various others, that cat's already out of the bag. So many journalists missed out on a fantastic opportunity to launch their careers, and they really feel bad about it now, and they're going to feel even worse about it when they realize what they did and the choice that they made at some particular point along this way. So Michael Barone in a Sunday story. And Michael Barone is no fan of Trump. He has been generally believed to be a Republican, but he's kind of like a establishment Republican. He's not a Trump supporter at all. So we have Michael Barone, who writes a story saying that Spygate will be much bigger than Watergate. Yes, I came to that conclusion about 799 videos ago. We have Stephen Cohen, who, of course, everyone knows. He's married to Katrina Leuvenhofer, or whatever her name is. They run The Nation, hardcore left-wing socialist rag. He is a Russian expert. He's, of course, been dissed since the entire thing went down. They used to always have him on TV. Now he's been essentially blackballed from the major network news programs and cable news programs because he was never on board with the Trump-Russia collusion thing, because he has a love affair with the Soviets, by the way. But he had an article out yesterday as well, saying basically the same thing. But he goes one step farther and takes it, what I was just talking about, he takes it one step farther and says, and another major reason that the left-wing media does not want to really talk about this story and the truth is because that they are complicit. They are complicit. That's what Stephen Cohen is saying. Now, in this other story that we were covering regarding this memo that was passed from this high-level British diplomat to someone on the Flynn team, John Solomon has a follow-up to that, and that is the following. So, a follow-up on that memo, we learned that the Brits questioned, as far as this, about the Brits questioning the dossier, we learned that congressional investigators have interviewed 2 officials who handled that memo. This has been confirmed with the British government that a communique was sent and the DOJ was alerted. One witness tells congressional investigators that he was interviewed by Uncle Bob, the executioner Mueller, and he was asked about the memo. A whistleblower first alerted Mark Meadows of the memo, and the memo, of course, alleges to tell Trump that the Brits only did what they did because they were asked by U.S. officials and they did not want it to hinder their future relationship with the Trump administration. That's why they wanted to come clean. So there we go. That story is still developing. They're still looking for that memo. They will find it. It's in the archive somewhere. Or maybe they'll get it from the British officials. Dumbass of the week. Friend and Liberty went for Mueller, CBS, and Horowitz. Peter Swales went with Mueller. Mona Lisa went with Mueller. Patty chipping in for pinch hitting for Mara. So it looks like Mara wants Comey, Mueller, and Pelosi. We have Larry. He's going with Comey and Mueller. We have Alan going with Mueller. We have N Bean Juice going with Anthony Joshua and the bug-eyed fool Adam Schiff. We have Johnny Five Finger. He's going with Obama. Walker on the Hill. He's locked into Mueller, Comey, and Fire Eye. Fire Eye. Carl, he's going with Mueller, Hillary, and Comey. Fern is going with Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, Chief Spreading Bull, and Comey. We have Gene. He's going with Mueller, Comey, and Megan Magoo. Jonathan. He's going with Schiff, the Rotten Reverend Clinton, and AOC. AJ is going with Uncle Bob, the drive-by executioner Mueller. We have Dash. He is going with the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Bird likes the Rotten Reverend Clinton. And all the deep staters that thought that they would get away with this. Joe Mack. He's going with Obama for taking that 600 gram from a poor country to drop anti-American dribble on them. Well done, Joe Mack. Patty Willing, voting for herself this time. Comey, Mueller, and de Blasio. L. Holt is going with Uncle Bob, the executioner. Gary is going with Barr until he hits one of the fish in the barrel. All right, we always need someone to stay on the skeptical side to keep us all honest. Well done, Gary. Mary, she's going with Uncle Bob. Susan is going with Elizabeth Warren, Chief Spreading Bull. T.W. Wintex is going with Uncle Bob the Executioner. Chevy Van, he likes Comey, Mueller, and the woman he went out with over this weekend. He must have went out with a liberal. He must have went out with a liberal. Sorry, Chevy Van. Try again. Let's see. We got Youngblood. He's going with the dishonorable former director of the Federal Bureau of Insubordination, Jim Comey. Douglas chimed in. He also likes Barr. He wants to see some results first. Now, that doesn't surprise me come from Douglas. Gary, a little surprised, but Douglas, no, not at all. That's what I expect from Douglas, by far. Love you, brother. Okay, so I have to be honest with you, man. I agree with the overwhelming, because Mueller won it pretty easily, almost 2-1, in fact. Yeah, in fact, basically almost 2-1, Uncle Bob the Executioner for Dumbass of the Week. I mean, he beat the second place finisher by 2-1. And I too would have cast my vote, and did cast my vote, as a matter of fact, for Uncle Bob the Executioner. That press conference, it's not just the press conference, it's the entire disturbing 2 years of Uncle Bob. But that was the sort of the icing on the cake. And hopefully it's not the last we hear of Uncle Bob. Like I say, we need him to come in and testify. He needs to be completely grilled. I mean, he needs to be really, really grilled. And so, yeah, I mean, that was disturbing. It was actually, I've never seen anything quite like it. I think he completely destroyed whatever credibility he thought he still had is gone. I think that was a horrible thing to do. It's just, it's a no-brainer. There's no question Uncle Bob, the clear choice for Dumbass of the Week this week, and it's obvious by the votes this week that everyone agreed. No question about it. Uncle Bob, head and shoulders above the rest of the field, captures the Dumbass of the Week award for this week. Very well deserved. Coming in second, with about half as many votes as Uncle Bob, and still getting quite a lot of votes, was the dishonorable former director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, James Comey. Comey, number 2. And bringing up the rear, the woman who will soon be hearing the words, "Turn around, Mrs. Clinton, and place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." The Rotten Reverend. So, Uncle Bob the Executioner winning Dumbass of the Week by a mile. Comey coming in second place. And the Rotten Reverend Clinton shows at number 3, soon to be indicted. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a very good evening. See ya. Bye.